twisted new season of The Traitors is finally here.
What did I get myself into?
The prize, $250,000.
I'm gonna lie and cheat and do whatever I have to do to win.
If you're gonna come for me, I'll finish you.
Shame on you!
I'm out for blood.
It is like a firing squad. Boom, 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 boom.
Let the games begin. Emmy Award winner, The Traitors. New episodes streaming Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on Peacock.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot and a special edition for you today. It's me, Naomi, and I'm going to be talking to Loughborough MP, Jeevun Sandher. Jeevun won the seat in the July 2024 general election. He's now a PPS, but he served on select committees, and his real area of focus is the affordability crisis that we've got in the UK. So not just the cost of living, but also looking at why wages have not risen in line with prices, causing a very acute affordability crisis, and how that feeds into the polarization we have in the country today, the way that people are beginning to blame others because of their own life circumstances not being what they are. So I really hope you enjoy the conversation. I will come back at the end with my thoughts. But for now, enjoy listening to Jeevun Sandher on Quiet Riot. Welcome to Quiet Riot, Jeevun.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
We are going to get into a lot of juicy topics in a bit, but I think our listeners need to get to know you. So, Jeevun, if Claudia Winkleman called you up for a political Celebrity Traitors, would you hope to be a faithful or a traitor? Or is Come Dine With Me more your bag for reality TV?
Well, a fun fact, I was once invited to come dine with me.
Whoa!
Yeah. So what they do is they send out letters to people on the electoral register, and they must have decided that I was of a certain age. And I was actually young then. And they invited me to come dine with me. I could tell you that my cooking skills as a student were nowhere near up to scratch. So I definitely turned that down. And on Celebrity Traitors, I'm always a couple of episodes behind, which is annoying because spoilers. Me and Louise, okay, the thing is...
Louise is your wife?
Louise is my wife, who's also an MP. I temperamentally would like to be a faithful, but the idea I like about being a traitor is that you have more agency about what happens. Otherwise, The game is a little bit...
boring.
You have to react to it, don't you, all the time if you're a faithful. And whereas a traitor, you can actually implement strategies. I'm hoping also I'd like the slight change they made this series, but I hope in the future the games have to give some kind of clue as to who the traitor is.
I agree. I end up skipping, because I watch on catch up, I end up skipping some of the games a bit because I know it's not really telling me much.
I do a bit of reading. I'll be reading The Economist or something and just let that bit kind of wash over me. And also it means their theories have no... To be fair to them, what can you ground it in? You just have to ground it in someone having a funny look at some point. What about you?
I just don't see the point of being a faithful. I, as you say, you want to be involved in the game. You want to be steering it all. I'm a complete control freak. So not knowing who was a traitor would drive me mad. So, yeah, I just want to be in the fun of being a traitor. Surely. Your pre-parliamentary career was in academia. Indeed, I should have used your official prefix, Dr. Jeevun Sandher. And latterly, you were at the New Economics Foundation, and at Quiet Riot, we are very good friends with Miata Fambula and Danny Shrishkandaraja. What were your particular areas of study, and what motivated you to take that leap from policy wonk to politician?
Yeah, so I should say that I've actually wanted to be in politics for a long time, and I became an economist to become a politician. Because my view was, I was kind of 16, 17, and I was like, look, I want to have an impact in the world, and I thought politics was the way to do that. I was aligned to the Labour Party, because I think everyone should have the ability to earn a decent life. And I did grow up in a country that was getting better. As you can imagine, my political opinions, if you like, from where I was as an early teenager have shifted, but I definitely still believe that, hold that to be true, and those are my values. So I became an economist to kind of do that, because I said, well, if you're going to go into politics, if you're going to help make those decisions, you need to then say what those decisions should be and have a reasoning and behind that. So I left university, went to the UK civil service, Then I went to Somaliland for 2 years because actually, part of my master's in development, and that's the biggest difference. And then I came back into academia, and I suppose that was, for me, was like a continuation of that ideal. Like, how do I know what the world should be like? And roughly speaking, the question for my PhD was effectively, why do people not live decent lives despite our country being so rich?
Right, we're a G7 country, yet we've got very, very unenviable rates of child poverty, in-work poverty, and an increasing number of people struggling to make ends meet. So we are going to get into all of that. But just tell me a little bit more about your work abroad and what kind of perspectives that gave you. Because when I speak to politicians who, and look, I don't know whether you went to private school or not, but a lot of them do, right? So they go to private school, they go to an ancient university, they might go to the bar, or they might follow your footsteps into civil service in Whitehall. Then they end up in Parliament, and they've effectively never even changed architect. Every building they've ever inhabited has kind of looked the same. So, I mean, you grew up in Luton, so, presumably not seeing quite the same levels of architecture as those that, are the Eton path into Westminster. But how important was it to you to go away somewhere so different to get that perspective, really?
Yeah, until this moment in my life, it was the biggest change I was able to achieve in my life, and therefore was the most professionally satisfying. When I first went out, my view was to go to the poorest nation in the world to make the biggest difference. As an economist, that was kind of, to somewhat, well, I thought it'd be much easier than it was, but like that was what I wanted to use my skill set to do. And what was Somaliland like? I mean, you're watching a nation being born.
Yeah.
And there's something about state formation that you don't really realize until you're there. So why do people follow a set of rules, set of relationships? What does that mean in practice? And your ability to influence change was the greatest ever be. The flip side of that is it is the poorest nation on earth. I did live in an armed compound. Actually Somaliland's very safe, but there were some various moments which were a little bit less safe, should we say. And I was also there when I first got there, had their greatest drought in living memory, which basically meant...
What year was this when we were there?
2016 to 18.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Quite a good time to be out of the UK politics-wise, I hasten to add. Speaking from bitter experience.
I will say that, I got the call about going to Somaliland the day the referendum was announced.
Right.
I remember being in the Treasury and people were crying, and I was just like, this is a slightly surreal day. Basically, our first budget, if you like, that I was kind of around for, the choice was basically between feeding people and paying soldiers. Which horseman of the apocalypse would you like? Because you're a nation that couldn't borrow money because of the macro policies. There just wasn't many policy options on the table. And the job coming out of that was, well, how do you ensure that you use the limited resources of this country and change the economic policies such that not only can have growth and poverty alleviation, but also deal with those crises in the future. And so for me, there were kind of three bits of that work, the first of which was around the National Development Plan. What should we actually be investing in as a country? The second of which was budget reform. How do you ensure you'll have a budget system that leaves you some money that actually, when the droughts do come and with climate change, it will happen more regularly, that there's money left over for that. And then the macroeconomic policy sides of what you're doing in inflation exchange rates. That makes it sound a lot simpler than it was, because as you can imagine, you turn up and I'm an economist and everyone goes, great. And that's nice. Then you have to really work hard, build relationships, learn what change is, and also learn how to achieve change when, before that you're in quite a strict structure and now you have to go and make that happen. What is the way you make change? You have a goal in mind, you work with people, you know that you don't have all the answers, you drive towards it knowing that's what's going to make things better, and you bring people along with you and you have those coalitions of people behind you. You said the perfect isn't the enemy of the good. I'm really glad we made a difference out there. I'm really glad they kept the stuff that we started off then, and indeed they continue to grow. It's been great to see, at the same time as facing such extreme challenges as, again, another drought quite recently, and climate change is not going to stop. And of course, as we're seeing, that's having geopolitical ramifications, because less so from the Horn of Africa, but more from the Sahel. There's seen those migration movements, of course, coming into Europe.
Jeevun, we talk about this on the show a lot, the irony of those who are most anti-immigration also being most anti-net zero and attempts to curb the climate crisis. And it's like, well, guys, take your choice. If you want people to stay in their country, A, support foreign aid and keeping them there, and B, let's for once and all get on top of the climate crisis so that these poor people don't need to leave where they live.
And you saw that, I mean, when I was there, also some pretty harrowing stories of people basically being trafficked into situations they certainly should have been in. They weren't expecting to be. So,
Horrendous.
It was. And it was, I don't want to like gloss over it, or you always look back with like rose-tinted glasses. There were incredibly difficult moments being out there. When rains come and you feel like a country's emotion change, that's a real moment, but also you're aware of the fact of why that is that moment. So it is, and it was very moving, but I would say to see a state being formed out of its foundation is very interesting there. And also politically as well, the idea of how do people actually come together to form an order, which, we take for granted here, but certainly wasn't the case out there.
And, having almost a clean slate to start from rather than forming government and inheriting legacy system and processes and, centuries and centuries of the way things are being done does, I imagine, in the birth of a new state offer something quite exciting that politicians the world over might have some envy for. If we were doing this all over again, would we build it the way we've got it? So let's move now to the domestic from the international, and that's where you have now chosen to focus your time and energy as an MP for Loughborough, and now taking up PPS roles, and I think you've been on select committees and things like that. Cost of living. The PM has said that any minute spent talking about anything other than the cost of living is a wasted minute. Do you agree with that? Is there a deeper problem that the government talks about the cost of living constantly, but hasn't yet articulated a clear theory of why it's happening or how they intend to end it?
So I think the affordability, the cost of living is definitely the biggest issue. And so, yeah, I think the PM's absolutely right to say that. You'll be unsurprised to hear me say that. But to start off with, I think it's worth grounding it in why it's so bad. So everyone knows about, I think, the short-term facts about the cost of living, right? Everyone saw the energy price spike. They particularly saw their essentials go up a lot more than other prices. So essentials went up by like 45% since 2021. Other prices only up by 25%. So comparatively, it's hitting everyone, but it's hitting those on the lowest incomes the hardest because their essentials went up, if you like, by more, and more of their income is spent proportionally on those essentials. We've spoken about climate change. The reason why we had the worst energy price spike precisely is because we're dependent upon natural gas to power our grid on the marginal pricing system. But that's the short-term stuff. I think to really understand this crisis, you've also got to understand, or we have to understand, it's a long-term problem. And the long-term problem is people just being unable to see a future, a decent future for them or their children. For those who are listening, I would say, ask yourself, are you financially comfortable? And if the answer is yes, you are in the record low third of people who feel that way. And the truth is, I think around Westminster and other places that, to your point around the policy sphere, people are financially comfortable. And we don't really understand, I think, emotionally, just how people feel.
Quiet Riot. You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win.
Quiet Riot. I was in Parliament earlier this week and I was talking to a member of the House of Lords. I will not name them, but they were relatively young for that aging body of legislators. And they are very busy. And actually, it's their partner that ends up doing most of the household stuff, shopping, cooking, etc. But this Christmas, they had gone along to the shops with their partner to buy stuff. And they were staggered at the cost of food in the supermarket. And that concerned me because I was like, no, you shouldn't be surprised. You should bloody well know.
Yeah.
And I do think that is a huge part of the problem of not being able to resonate properly in the way that you'd really hope to cut through to with voters, that you really get it, that you understand that broccoli used to be 39p and it's now 90p.
And olive oil, which, I mean, each time I look at olive oil, I'm shocked. Massively increased. Like, someone put it well to me, like a bag of shopping used to cost me 20 quid. Now it costs me 40 quid.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, easily.
That's some of your income if you're better off. But if you've got a little bit less money, it's a lot more.
But you're an economist, Jeevun, and I want to get to the bottom of the affordability angle on it, because yes, we are all told that, you know, these exogenous shocks have happened to prices, whether that's been war, whether that's been tariffs, whether it's been, you know, other trade wars, whether it's been Ukraine, climate related ones, etc. But wages haven't gone up. Why? You know, the affordability comes when you're not paying people anymore, but the price of everything they need to buy is getting out of control.
Over the last 14 years, right, it's definitely true to say austerity meant less economic growth, the worst squeeze of wages since Napoleon, go on. But there's another, like, a deeper problem here as well, which started in the 80s. And it wasn't just Thatcher, although she definitely contributed. It was technological change destroying manufacturing jobs. And it basically meant you end up with high pay, usually graduate jobs in major cities, with those graduates working together, and lots of low paid jobs everywhere in the country. And therefore, the long-term affordability crisis is effectively non-graduates being unable to afford a decent living because their job just doesn't pay enough. And you need, by the way, as a two-parent family, to earn about 35k each just for the basics for a family. And 40% of full-time earners, full-time workers earn less than that. So you've got a good jobs problem. And then on the other side, what young people are finding now is that, okay, you were told to go to university and get a good degree so you can get a good job, except then you go to a major city and you're finding housing unaffordable. And it just means in the long term, the number of people who can do well are kind of becoming ever and ever smaller. And it ends up being basically graduates who are going to inherit enough money at enough time to be able to buy a home and get on. And that small number of people explains a huge amount of the anger. So it's not just about the last couple of years, which have been really, really bad, and historically the worst cost of living crisis we've known, but it's also those long-term drivers, which means people don't see a way they go, oh yes, it's going to get better. And there are definitely ways to help fix that, but it's really worth everyone pausing and realize just how bad it is for people out there. It's today, it's tomorrow, and it's the next decade.
I know plenty of people who grew up in relatively what we would have described as modest households, where their parents would both work very long hours, but they could just about afford a mortgage and they could just about afford to take their children on holiday once a year, maybe abroad, maybe not. And the children of those parents are now parents themselves who cannot afford to get on the housing ladder, and they can't even afford to go to the pub a couple of times a year, let alone conceive of taking children on holiday. We're all having to work far many more hours to buy the same things. Is this a uniquely British thing? Is the UK uniquely bad at managing this problem? Is it a Western thing? And if it is, you know, particularly poor in the UK, and maybe land ownership has got something to do with that, what are the kind of structural underlying problems with our economic system that mean that we are, on the one hand, a G7 country, and on the other, one where an increasing number of people feel like they can't make ends meet?
It's a whole high-income nation problem. We can come to the politics later, but the reason why you're seeing such a rise in populism around the world, a huge driver, is just the fact that these forces, technological change hollowing out the middle, and not enough good jobs, and not enough, if you like, basics of life, are true across high-income nations. But the UK has been particularly badly hit for a whole series of policy choices that were made, you know, in the 1980s under Thatcher, which was effectively, we'll let manufacturing go, but we won't have an investment to help build good jobs in its wake. Not understanding that there isn't a law of economics that says everyone who works hard will get a decent job and a decent wage. Like, technology was moving in another direction. You had to really try and work to provide those clusters. And obviously Thatcherism was basically like, you're on your own, good luck, off you go. So we faced a large decline in manufacturing back then. And in the recent period, look, why we have the highest energy price spike? It's because the last government didn't invest in nuclear and it didn't invest in renewables, and we were dependent on natural gas. And why is house prices so high here? Because we didn't build anywhere near enough houses over the last 14 years. And why is it, for example, childcare costs have been so high? Because the state just hasn't been stepping in until quite recently to help ensure those costs were lower. So the factors, if you like, driving it are common, but there are definitely policy factors. I mean, the UK has been an outlier in how hard we've been hit and how hard families have been hit.
So where is, would you say, the government's positive vision for good jobs, higher wages that come with those good jobs, stronger productivity leading to better living standards? Because the prevailing narrative is that if Labour can't say clearly how it's going to materially improve our lives, why should voters assume that they know how to do it?
And voters will have to feel it. Even though like real wages are growing and there'll be £150 of energy bills, etc., as those things start to push forward, you start to have people feeling it. But until you feel it in your pocket, that's going to be the moment of proof. There's kind of 3 different ways to do it, and there's 3 different things that I think we're doing. The first around it is around wages and jobs. Now, economic growth, as we've spoken about, will lead to rising average wages. And that is good news, even if you're not in one of those kind of very high-paying, high-graduate jobs, because you're still having wage growth throughout the economy. And we're seeing the roots of that, and you see some of that around planning reform. But there's a whole other bit around that as well, which is, yes, the industrial strategy, yes, the private sector, but also the state also stepping in to create good jobs. So you think about the Clean Energy Jobs Plan, you think about investing in social infrastructure like healthcare, childcare, and education. That's directly creating good jobs, and directly creating good jobs outside of major cities, because it takes quite a lot of space to build clean energy and the investments around it. And healthcare and childcare, for example, are weighted towards slightly more deprived areas. Some of those are within cities, but some of those, of course, are outside of major cities across the country. So wages and jobs is the first lever. The second is costs. You've seen it on childcare, the £150 on energy bills. Those kind of things that are directly getting down costs are the other lever. So you're getting up wages and jobs, you're getting down costs. And the third really is social security. The 2-child benefit cap being lifted. It's a huge amount of change. It's the 100,000 kids out of poverty, but it's also those who are still below the poverty line, but actually not at the point of what is effectively starvation.
Yeah.
So that's the huge changes. So wages and jobs, cost, social security. Those are the 3 levers that governments and this government will pull to make life more affordable in the next 3 years going forward.
Do you get a sense, are you frustrated as parliamentarians in the Labour Party that there isn't more effective, easy to grasp communication of this is the vision, this is how we're doing it?
I take responsibility, and I think we should all take responsibilities. It's a privilege to be in this place. You know, like you said, right, we started off, we said that the Prime Minister has made very clear for not talking about affordability, for not talking about the cost of living, what are we talking about? And I would say, look, alongside affordability, I'd also say there's also, you know, the other 2 existential challenges are climate and defence. But on the affordability side, the case is not just that we have to talk about it, it's that we also have to find ways to communicate that to the public. And you're living in a world where obviously people are not getting their news in the same way they used to by just watching the 6 and 10. It's coming through, being beamed into your phones. We're living like different lives, both geographically, economically, and through our screens. And that's on all of us to communicate that vision. And it's on all of us to collectively provide the leadership and fill that out. So I wouldn't, you know, it's on me to be communicating what we're doing. And it's on me to help do everything I can to ensure this government is making life more affordable for every single person in this country.
Quiet Riot. I didn't realize I was wasting $415 a month until I downloaded Rocket Money. I thought I had my finances under control until the app laid out all my spending and categorized it for me. Takeout, shopping, and unused subscriptions were quietly draining my account. And as a result, my savings took a backseat. But Rocket Money doesn't just tell you what you're wasting money on. It takes action to save you money. First, the app looks at your income and monthly expenses and calculates how much you can safely spend each day to stay under budget. Rocket Money also finds and cancels unwanted subscriptions for you and even negotiates better rates on your bills, so you have more money in your pocket. On average, Rocket Money members can save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Users love the app with over 186,000 five-star ratings. It's time to simplify your finances and take control of your money. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
Quiet Riot. Let's move on now to the link between affordability crises and polarisation and division across society. And you've spoken about this link. You know, with living standards falling, you will inevitably end up with a more polarised society. You know, the danger that when people feel economically trapped, they just stop believing the system is fair and they start to look for enemies instead of solutions. So I guess my question to you is, why should anyone be surprised that inequality feeds division?
I suppose, they shouldn't be surprised. I think what is surprising is the way in which it's kind of become magnified. And I remember talking to someone, they were just like, look, my answer to this stuff is just shut off the internet, which I thought was like a thing, right? But it's true to say that in a democracy, you're supposed to vote for the things that you want, and people are effectively voting for being able to have a decent life. And that just hasn't happened since at least 2010. I would say the way that New Labour dealt with like technological change was, by the way, to redistribute due tax credits as well as have regional development. So people did see growing wages, even if you like, not enough good jobs were being created at the time, and that left under austerity. But yes, it's not surprising it's leading to a turbocharging of division. I think it's that amplified with the fact that living in very separate places. So living in a post-industrial place, so I'm in the East Midlands, is very different than London. And seeing different things on your screens mean people are just living completely different lives. And there's a certain sense of mutual incomprehensibility sometimes, I find, between these things. I mean, you know, people, when they're asked to describe their children's future, are worried, uncertain, frustrated, conflicted, angry. Those are the top 5 answers. 3 in 4 believe the nation's best days are behind us. At the same time as wealth and the number of billionaires is rising, at the same time as in our economy, we can't afford the basics. There's just such huge divide between what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing. And from a democratic point of view, people are really saying, I'm really angry, I'm frustrated, I'm fearful, I'm furious. I want this to change. I've been saying that for a really long time.
And beyond income inequality, what else is driving polarization? I mean, you touched on it a little bit about, you know, the atomization of our lives. We're consuming things on our phones. We're curating our own entertainment rather than, as a nation, knowing that, you know, pretty much everyone is sitting down to watch the same program at the same time on a Saturday night, or a, you know, season finale, or the big dum-dum-dums of the EastEnders crescendo on a soap storyline. That we've really lost all of that. So, you know, can we only blame income inequality, wealth inequality, affordability crises for the increasingly polarized world we find ourselves in? Or are they completely interconnected? Because we've got no bloody money, we're not going out and talking to each other at the pub, we're sitting in watching YouTube on our own device in our own room.
Yeah, they're absolutely connected. It's still worse because you still can basically scroll quite a lot. One of my mates once said to me, as a doctor, was like, you chase dopamine, but you don't chase belonging and connection, which I thought was quite an interesting way to look at it. In one sense, I suppose having easy access to entertainment sometimes by itself reduces connection. But there's something else there as well to be said, because look, we're also living in a world where it's not just the rise of populism, it's the rise of the far right. And there's a narrative there and a story there and a vision there which says, if I just attack that person, or rather the reason why your life is rubbish because of that person over there, and if I just attack that person, if I just exclude that person, your life will be better off. And don't listen to those elites who keep telling you that life will get better, because clearly they're not getting it right. There's a policy answer that make people's lives better, but there's also a political answer for us, if you like, on the progressive side, which is, what does it mean to be British, and what is our vision of Britishness to meet this moment? And I would say it's unity and strength, i.e. we are a stronger nation together when each of us does well. And the vision on the other side is of weakness and division. And those are where I think you're two different kind of visions of the country. And you have to set out the vision of why we're better, if you like, as a united nation.
Yeah.
And then say, look, what is that about? It's about different communities who do come together. They're not monolithic. And that's not a statement about ethnicity. That's also a statement about the fact that in my part of the world, people say "Hey up, duck," and down in London, they say "boss man." Like,
Yeah.
that's a difference.
Yeah.
But they come together as one British people, same
Yeah.
set of values, a common history, and a common culture as well.
So, as a British Asian, how did you feel hearing the Prime Minister talk about Britain becoming an island of strangers? And like, does that rhetoric, help people feel more secure? Does it distract from government's failures to materially improve lives? I was obviously, deeply unhappy with that speech. I know a lot of people are, and he has apologized for it since. But I'm keen to know how it made you feel and your views on how government comms can do far better to make the point that I think he was probably trying to make, but in a much less hostile way.
Well, I think, look, I'll come to the Island Strange thing in particular. I will come to that. If you look at Keir's conference speech, entire statement about what this nation stands for and where we are today, and the fact that, what is it that's brilliant about our nation? We can support the English football team and we can have a curry afterwards or beforehand, that the culture we've built is one that is intertwined. I can go to the Gurdwara and go to the pub on the same day. I exist, if you like, in a Sikh, in a community of lads that interact and intersect. And that's the beauty of Britain, that we are the least racist nation probably on earth. Not the least racist, they're very close to it. Now, the reason why to be proud of that is because of these ways these different communities have come together and actually underneath a set of common British values built out of, if you like, a story. I think particularly the Second World War there is really important, that we came together as one people, united with decency and determination in the face of impossible odds. So we really kind of forged modern Britain at that time. And Churchill, not of my party, but certainly still one of the greatest prime ministers this country's ever had. On the specific point that you mentioned, look, I followed politics for a really long time. I had no idea of that phrase or its provenance. And my understanding of it and every single statement since has suggested that people just weren't aware of it. I mean, I would not have picked it up, I suspect, as being
Okay.
So,
Unless the media had told you why it was.
yeah, and that's what the readout was. And I think also, look, for me, myself, I do try to, I know it sounds strange being in politics, but to have a sense of charity towards others. And we're living in a world of, if you like, interaction. And so what gets rewarded is extremities rather than, the charitable moderate interpretation is not the one that's going to get the likes and retweets or reposts on Blue Sky now.
Quiet Riot.
I didn't even realize I was wasting $415 a month until I downloaded Rocket Money. I thought I had my finances under control until the app laid out all my spending and categorized it for me. Takeout, shopping, and unused subscriptions were quietly draining my account. And as a result, my savings took a back seat. But Rocket Money doesn't just tell you what you're wasting money on. It takes action to save you money. First, the app looks at your income and monthly expenses and calculates how much you can safely spend each day to stay under budget. Rocket Money also finds and cancels unwanted subscriptions for you and even negotiates better rates on your bills so you have more money in your pocket. On average, Rocket Money members can save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Users love the app with over 186,000 five-star ratings. It's time to simplify your finances and take control of your money. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
Quiet Riot.
So in terms of Britishness, I'm really struck by, you talking about that. And my fear is that we are just living in these atomized worlds with less and less in common with the people next door to us and more in common with the people that we meet online who may well live in another country with whom we share an interest in gaming or whatever issue it is that we found each other through. And by no longer sharing institutions, rituals, or now even the same media moments that I talked about before, Traitors Final being an honourable exception and maybe Strictly as well, fewer people going to places of worship, many fewer being able to go to the pub, even if they want to, because the pubs are facing their own struggles. Can policy alone fix this sort of fragmentation of both the social and the economic? And if so, what would you be really hoping to see driving that change from a policy perspective?
It's policy and it's politics. It's, the policy is the stuff that you've spoke about quite rightly, right? So the policy is, make life affordable, make sure people can form communities locally. And that does mean spaces that they can actually go to that aren't so expensively prohibitive. You've got all that. And then you've got the kind of, to your point, national days, national football tournaments. These are moments we come together. And some of those can be like, the Americans have Independence Day, for example. We have the Jubilee. You can absolutely have more national days. There's a policy answers to that. But there is a political answer as well. And there's a vision of this country. And there's a vision of this country we should be able to unite under. And for me, it is that idea of united Britain. It is those values of unity, decency, determination. It is a history that, it's born out of the Second World War, but talks about kings and queens. And one reason why I'm still, well, not still, but have always been in favour of the monarchy is because it provides, if you like, a link between now and this nation's founding moments. And the other thing is also our culture is not one that's like, look, Shakespeare's really important. And I'm not saying it isn't. And I'm not saying all the great British composers aren't important and the high culture isn't. But it's also like, it's everyday Britain. It's queuing politely. It's taking the piss out of each other. It's having a pint. There are moments that are just within our everyday existence that are very special and very British. And we should also encapsulate, monitor, celebrate those.
Yeah. And if we don't do that, the other side are very busy trying to do it.
Yeah, and you've seen them.
I'm going to end by asking you then, Jeevun, to give us a really tangible thing that listeners can do when they feel like politics isn't delivering for them and that all they get to do is vote every few years if they want to exercise any kind of change whatsoever. And even then, their vote may well be wasted if they live in a safe seat or whatever. What could genuinely help you as an MP or the government or just your local community? What advice would you have for people listening who actually want to take on board what you said today and try and change the world for the better?
We spoke a lot about isolation, like get involved. And, I would say, look, if you're aligned to the Labour Party, join the Labour Party. If you're not aligned to the Labour Party, I've got some more convincing to do.
But you could join a union.
You could join a union as well, right? And absolutely so. And also like any other local community organisations that aren't necessarily so politically aligned, figure out what it is that you want to make a difference and make a difference. And there's every way to do that. And, we see a lot of online activism, but there's a lot of in-person activism as well. It is leafleting, it is turning up, it is donating. But away from that big stuff, which is like stuff that takes time and effort, like one, being really proud of this country, and two, have a sense of understanding towards one another, even at a time when it's becoming increasingly difficult, knowing all force there is a sense of division by which we stand against. My political opponents should not be at a point of existential battles. We should have a point of like decency and understanding, even when that's difficult. And that's what I would take away from this, even though, yes, it is incredibly hard. And that's also a lesson for me as well, to be honest with you.
Well, it can be a New Year's resolution for us both, Jeevun. Thank you so much for coming on Quiet Riot.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you have a wonderful day, week, and year.
And that is a wrap on the special edition with Jeevun Sandher. I was really struck by Jeevun talking about this sense of Britishness being ceded to the far right and the need to intertwine our shared identity as the people of the islands of the UK with a vision for what we want that country to be, how we want it to operate, how we want to feel within it, how we can all rub along together, and the intersection of that with the affordability crisis, that if we can soothe much of that and start to raise living standards, then it'll be a lot more difficult for people to blame their neighbour for the situation that they find themselves in today. I hope you enjoyed the show too. If you did or you didn't, let me know. You can find us in all the usual places, particularly on Blue Sky. And yeah, we'd love your feedback. You can send that through to quietriotpod@gmail.com if you prefer. We've got another show coming out tomorrow. We've got an Iran special of Behind the Lines with Arthur Snell. So do make sure that you're tuning into that, because while we've all been distracted with Greenland and Venezuela, as we talked about in Sunday school, the riots in Tehran have really kicked off, and we thought we needed to get some expert insight into what is happening there and what the future may hold for Iran and the implications for the region and the world more broadly. So keep an ear out for that. Don't forget that we love you all very, very much. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.